A quote from the legendary Major Rusty Bradley, author of Lions of Kandahar and Special Forces legend. Quote, "I've had the pleasure of serving with several Texans, and they were all born fighters. It must be something in the water down there." End quote. Sergeant First Class Riley Stephens, every bit a true Texan, was raised in the sleepy farming town of Tolar, Texas, about 45 minutes south of Fort Worth. And places like Tolar are only further proof that some of our nation's most elite warriors come from those towns, barely discernible on a map. Places that we might mention with the inevitable follow-up question of, where is that? U.S. Army Air School, U.S. Army Airborne School, Warrior Leaders Course, Advanced Leaders Course, the Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape Course, Hostage Negotiation Course, Advanced Cardiac Life Support Course, Emergency Medical Technician Ambulance Course, Special Forces Advanced Urban Combat Course, Special Operations Target Interdiction Course, USASOC Jumpmaster Course, the Special Forces Intelligence Sergeant Course, U.S. Army Ranger School, and the Special Forces Qualification Course. 6 deployments in a sterling career before 12 years in, before even going Special Forces selection. Sergeant First Class Riley Stephens, a true legend of the Special Operations community. Some of his life depicted in the epic novel Lions of Kandahar by the aforementioned Rusty Bradley. Sergeant First Class Stephens took his last stand on September 28th, 2012, providing covering fire for his unit in Wardak Province, Afghanistan. All the words I've spoken about Riley and an incredible career as a Special Forces medical sergeant pale in comparison, though, to the memories of a father who witnessed his son's very first steps and supported him through his most painful tribulations as a Special Operations warrior. Those words that you'll hear in this podcast are powerful and strong and may require a moment to take and think and contemplate about what it would truly be like to experience loss on that level. Mick Stephens might have been Riley's father, but he was also his closest friend. And on that day in September, Mick experienced one of the greatest tragedies that can possibly befall a father. He lost his firstborn. Here he is with an education on loss and grieving. Mick Stephens.
The Veterans Project is a comprehensive essay capturing the legacies of our warfighters, caregivers, and civilians who have stepped forward in defense of our patriotic principles in an effort to capture their stories and to never forget the staggering sacrifices of our nation's finest. This is the Veterans Project podcast, where our legacies are the mission. Here's your host, Tim Kay.
My name is Tim Kay, and I will be your host. This is the Veterans Project podcast. We're here to honor a great American. Riley Stephens was killed in Afghanistan about 7 years ago. We've got his father here with us today. It's an honor, sir. Thank you for being here. Mick, thank you.
No, thank y'all for telling his story.
No, we're going to have you tell his story. So,
and one day you will tell his story.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. So, Mick, tell us a little bit. We like to backtrack throughout this podcast to kind of talk about, the beginning days and where you came from and all that. So tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're from.
Well, I came here originally from Michigan, and I came here in '76, and we were out of work in Michigan, and they wanted to put us on welfare, and we knew there was a better place to be, and the good Lord sent us to Texas. And so we've been here ever since. And we, as in Joanne, has my wife, she's been here just on a different parallel here. Yeah. She came from Arizona, and I came from Michigan, and
moved to beautiful Tolar, Texas.
Uh-huh. We came here, first I was in Glen Rose.
Okay.
And that was a good place to end up because it was one of the most rowdiest places in Texas.
And you're a rowdy guy.
And we were rowdy, yeah. And so when I left Michigan, it just wasn't any different because in Michigan we were still just good old boys. And there you got along, you could fight, and you bought the beer, and you didn't shoot anybody. And when I ended up in Glen Rose, it was just like nothing changed, except they had work.
Yeah.
And
spoken like a true Special Forces father's speech.
and that is it. Yeah. And so,
why did you move here? You moved here for work?
I had worked for an electrical company at Midland, Michigan, and they had a nuclear plant that had just started.
Okay.
And they closed it down, and a few of the guys that were there told me about Brown and Root. And they said, it's just starting up, and it's not out of the ground yet, and they're going to be hiring. And I jumped in my Chevy, me and several others, my brother, which he still lives in Texas with us. And so we made it here, and mostly everybody else left. 3 of us stayed. And the rest is history. We got here, and we had to work for a year before the plant opened up. And so we dug cedar trees and hauled hay and drank and got to know all the locals, and they accepted us. I got here, my hair was down to my shoulders. And, it wasn't a week later, I had a buzz cut. And, it was just the way it was. I right away, I knew that where I come from didn't work.
Yeah.
And so I never told them, the way we did it, that never come out of this Yankee's mouth. I says, what do I do?
That's a smart attitude to have in Texas. Because they won't care.
Amen.
Yeah.
And they really accepted us. And there was a little, in Glen Rose, Jack Cathy was a judge, and he was a wild judge, young man. And he took us in, and I didn't know he was a judge. I had an A-frame break in the middle of Glen Rose, and I thought I was going to jail, and because I dug up their pavement. And this redhead come along, and he was eating a raw potato and had a toothpick in his mouth and a salt shaker. And he asked us, he said, what are you doing? And I'm telling him, well, I'm sort of stuck right here now, And he asked me if he said, you need work? And I said, yep. And he said, you want a job? Yes, sir. And he looked at his car, and he said, do you want to sell it? It was a Chevrolet, and I'm going, oh, yeah, I'd like to sell it. So this redhead got underneath the car and took baling wire, and he wired all that stuff back up. Give me an address and told me to go there. And he said, tomorrow morning, he said, I'll have a job for you. And that night, this old boy took the motor out of that car and put it in a truck, give me the truck, and sent me to the hayfields, me and my brothers and everybody else. And,
wow.
It was just intervention right there. And,
that's awesome.
It was 3 days later that we found out he was the county judge.
Oh, wow.
And so the bunch of us
weren't expecting that, huh?
Absolutely not. We were known as Kathy's Goon Squad after that. and we had a good time.
Yeah, that's the good old days of law.
It really was.
Yeah.
Yeah, Larimore, good sheriff. He was a good old boy sheriff. And,
sounds like he really cared.
He did, and they taught us the ways of Texas.
Yeah.
And we were willing to learn.
That's awesome. So how much longer was it before Riley came along?
Well, he was, as soon as we got settled, I had brought him here. He was, 3 years old.
Okay.
And so he was a Texan. I mean, that's everybody. Well, he was born in Michigan. His guys used to jack with him.
We'll take
but he was definitely a Texan. And absolutely.
Yeah.
And his brother was born here, and so his brother got that on him.
Yeah.
But Riley loved Texas, and he loved everything about Texas.
Now, obviously, we're talking about Riley Stephens, who's 3rd Special Forces Group, an incredible warrior, a man who lost his life in Afghanistan fighting bravely so that we could enjoy the privileges and liberties that we enjoy at home. And we're very thankful for that. I, as a veteran, am very thankful for men like Riley, Green Berets, the ultimate warriors who go out there on the battlefield and do it at the highest level. So men like Riley are incredible. And So that's why I really want to get the background of, where he grew up, and if you could kind of talk about him and what it was like raising him.
Yeah, it was right after that I become a manager over at the local bar. Is a country club, they called it, but it was a big honky tonk. And so Riley and I that's pretty well how him and I started. And so it was him and I, and we had the bar. And from there, when after two and a half years, I was tired of the drunks, and so I moved to Toller.
Okay.
And I had married a gal, and so we moved to Toller. And Toller accepted us. Janice's mother, Charlene, was a awesome person. Mm-hmm. And she taught both of us a lot of values.
Yeah.
And I always mention Charlene because that was his mama, and she was an awesome person.
Yeah.
And she was hardcore.
Yeah.
She didn't take slack for nothing.
I bet not.
And so, Riley was raised by Toller.
Okay.
And there's just good people here.
Yeah.
And at about the age of 8 years old, him and Leanne, Joanne, my wife's daughter, they got together, and she got him into horses, and all of that helped. And Riley was always a soldier. Mm-hmm. Riley, when he was 5 years old, he set up battlefields. I bought him Army men, and he was always at the top. No matter what, Riley was at the top, and he never lost.
Yeah.
And he knew what he wanted to be.
Yeah.
And it was a soldier, and he wanted to be a badass soldier. And he did.
What do you remember about him the most as a kid? What was his spirit like? How was he as a kid?
Well, he was pretty hard-headed. And everything he'd done, he never wanted to lose. Yeah. He done whatever it took from time he was 5, 6. Whatever that he had to do, he did to win whatever he was doing. Mm. And at games, if he couldn't win, he'd throw the board. And it was over.
Yeah.
He didn't want to play no more.
Yeah.
And it was... And he loved hunting. He was a sportsman. He loved outdoors. He
sounds like a true Texan.
And he was. He was true Texan.
Yeah. Do you have any funny memories of Riley, like when he was young, in particular, that you remember of him? In middle school or high school? Any ones that you can tell? Anything that you really remember specifically about him? Back in high school, or?
Oh, well, yeah, there was a Coke machine, one of the little deals, but he was probably 14 then. And I get a call, and so they call me, and Riley's he's in the emergency. So, of course I go in, and his ankle, it blew out his ankle, the big old hole in his ankle.
Oh, wow.
Good God, it's Riley. What was you doing? And he didn't lie very well. And he's going, we were lifting weights. Okay. And he said, the weight fell off and it fell on my foot. I'm going, really? Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. And all the boys, all the football teams go, yeah, that's what's happened.
Mm-hmm. This is already sounding a little suspect.
Yeah. And so, and through it all, though, it started rotting inside. It was so deep.
Wow.
And even then, Riley, the doctor told him, he said, here's the brush. He says, you got to take this brush and you got to scrub the inside of that out every day. Mm. And Riley said, all right. And I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Riley, he'd take that brush every day and he'd reach inside that wound and he'd just scratch it all out and clean it. And he was all about it.
Wow.
And so about 2 weeks later, finally he come to me and, Dad, he says, I got to tell you. I said, so what are you telling me? He says, we were trying to get a free Coke. Mm-hmm. I'm going, a free Coke? He says, yeah, if you tip the soda machine over, he says, you get it'll drop a Coke out of it. Mm. And he says, so me and the team, we had the Coke machine lifted up, shaking it, getting the Cokes out. And he said, that's what fell on my foot. And lies, that's about his biggest one, and he couldn't
even hold on to that one.
He couldn't hold on. He now, not saying that he couldn't tell stories.
Yeah.
He had a lot of stories, but he just
there's a difference.
Yeah, he just couldn't lie to me.
Yeah.
And that held true.
Mm-hmm.
To from then on, and he played ball. He was center and guard, and I mean he was as much of a football player as he was a soldier. Teams used to keep the quarterbacks out when they played Toller because Riley would take them out.
Really?
And they'd be done for the season.
Wow.
And so
he was mean on that field.
He was mean, and he was. He played ball like he was in war. I mean, he was definitely.
Yeah. What do you remember about his decision to join the Army? How did that come about?
Well, it came about. He was wanting to be in the Army anyway, but we had a restaurant, and he wasn't too much in working in the restaurant.
Yeah.
And he was 17.
Yeah.
And he was soon to be 18. He had already graduated, so he graduated. He was salutatorian. He had a photographic memory, and so all through school, he aced everything. And so he really didn't have an idea what he wanted to do yet. And so we had him washing dishes at the restaurant. That was not ideal for Riley.
Yeah.
And so...
A Green Beret not happy with satisfying washing dishes? Imagine.
That. And so one day it was the joke because one of the waitresses was screaming at him about needing more silverware, and I don't know what you say language on here, but
you can always bleep it out.
There you go. But he said in nicer terms, he told her, hey, screw you and your silverware.
Yeah.
He threw everything down. I turned around, fired him, and Joanne, she turned around. She called the recruiter. And so the recruiter came up, and they hadn't talked 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And Riley was turning 18 at that time, and the recruiter's good. We will do this. And so Riley went in, and he excelled from then on.
He left for Alaska soon after that, right?
Yeah.
But did he know that he wanted to be Special Forces at the time, or was he just sure that he wanted to be in the Army?
He just wanted to be a gunner.
Okay.
That's his whole deal is he just wanted to be behind the big gun.
Yeah, right.
And once he got into Alaska, the togetherness in Alaska, before also, let me back up. And he was also an EMT at 17.
Oh, okay. I did not know that.
He was the Toller EMT.
Oh, wow.
Legal, I don't know, but they definitely used him.
Yeah.
And his first tragedy that we figured out he could handle, a baby died in his arms from Lipan. They went and they tried to save a baby, and that shook him up pretty good. But he remained, and he was their volunteer fire department. He was in there. They got a engine dedicated to him.
Wow.
At Toller.
And
is
it down there at that station now?
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, I've seen that station before.
Right,
yeah.
and it's got the ODA on it and his name, and they done real well by him. Yeah. And but it was right after that, on the corner where we live, a car pulled in front of a truck, and a little girl went out the back window of the truck, hit her. Wow. Another truck hit her. Pretty traumatic.
Yeah.
And Riley was about the first on the scene, and it was right by us, so I was right there. And so he took the little girl in his arms and let her pass away in his arms.
Wow.
And he knew she was going to die, and so he didn't try anything extra. All he did was hold her.
Yeah.
And so there goes his, the medical part, and he really wanted to be in that type of a situation.
Yeah. Do you think him being an EMT, obviously he was already interested in the medical side, but do you think that kind of that occurrence, that tragedy right there kind of propelled him into that?
Yes, I'm real sure of it.
Yeah.
And even though we went in, all he wanted to do is shoot the gun.
Yeah.
But they done the test that they do and et cetera, where they come back and they said, you're definitely not going to just remain behind a gun.
Yeah.
And so through Alaska, he was there 2 different years. And it was so close in Alaska. He always talked about how everybody was they were always so close, and everything they'd done was together.
Yeah.
Well, then he left Alaska and he went Fort Campbell. Well,
Okay.
Fort Campbell was not that way.
Yeah.
And so he went back to Alaska, and he stayed a few months after that in Alaska, and then he went into selection, and he become a ranger, and he he went to Bragg, and I don't know as much as I should of the names and the terms and et cetera.
okay.
But he, after being a ranger, he got in selection, but then he knew he left. He was in Alaska the second time. He knew he needed something,
Yeah.
and the Rangers.
Yeah.
Then from Rangers, of course, he knew he needed to be the best,
Yeah.
and so that's where he worked real hard at it.
Did he talk to you about selection at all and going through that?
Yeah,
Or-
he did.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course I couldn't. Dad, you can't tell anything I'm
Right.
telling
Yeah,
you.
yeah,
So yeah,
How do you feel about it though? The process. Did he-
he said I don't even know if I should say what, but through selection at the end of it, and he said when they took that hood off in his head, and he seen that U.S. flag, he knew that was where he was supposed to be and what he was supposed to do.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, the flag. He always thought a lot of the flag, but he's never like that moment.
Right.
He always talked about that at that moment when they took that hood off.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's supposed to be out there or not.
You'll be fine. Yeah.
But when they took that hood off, that moment that he knew that he was going to be one of the best, the Green Beret.
That's cool.
He didn't just want to be a Green Beret. He wanted to be one of the best Green Beret.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Which he turned.
Yeah.
He's an old man.
Yeah.
And he
Sounds like
that.
he made it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, he did.
Yeah. What do you remember about when he got to his teams? Did he? Yeah, you guys talked often. I mean, that's one of the cornerstones that I've noticed about you and our discussions over the past couple of days is that you and Riley got along extremely well, and you talked a lot. So, what do you remember about when he first got to the teams and.
Well, he talked about how close the team and that. Really, when he got on his first team and he realized what he was. He told me, he says, Dad, he said, don't take this the wrong way. He said, but, you're like 13th, 14th. He said, in the peck in the ladder. Because he said, my team, he said, it's all about my team.
Yeah.
And he said, when I go to war with my team, he said, no matter if we're home, he said, the team has my back. And he said, I have theirs. And he said, you got to know that I love you unconditionally. He said, but in the pecking order, he says, you got to know that you're below that.
Yeah.
He said, because they're my team.
Yeah.
And I got it.
Yeah.
And when your son's going to war, that's how you want it.
Right. Yeah. You want to feel that way.
Yes, I had no problem at all. Now his wives weren't so happy with that.
Yeah.
But because they didn't rate as high as I was.
Yeah, right.
So, and then we got some awesome daughter-in-laws and daughters, and that we can't take away from them. But that's how Riley was. His team was everything.
Yeah. What did you remember him coming home in between tours and what that was like, in the time that he came home? Did he seem different when he'd come home from his tours?
No, when the very first time he come home from war, you could tell that he was different.
Yeah.
I mean, his first tour was pretty heavy.
Yeah.
And when he come back, but he was not, like sad or psycho or, it was Dad. This is so fucking awesome.
Yeah.
And
he loved it.
He loved it.
Yeah.
And after Spear on Gar in 2006, there was nothing like it.
Yeah.
And
that's the battle that the book Lines of Kandahar is based
Right.
off of, right? And
Yes.
Riley was active in that.
And he was real active in it. And Bill, they lost Bill right after that, Bill Brown. And Bill Brown, they talked about Bill and him when they figured out who each other were. Bill lived in White Settlement, an hour from here or so. But they figured out Bill come here and tried to hustle his women, And, we fought back then. Yeah, remember the rope hole? Yeah, it was that type of closeness.
Yeah.
I mean, and
He talked a lot about Bill, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, he loved Bill.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's and I talked to Bill on the phone. I never met Bill through all that. I never met Bill
Yeah.
face to face, but I
You probably felt like you knew him.
Oh, I did. I talked to him a lot of drunks.
Yeah.
It would be Riley would be, Dad, here's Bill. Talk to Bill, and I talked to Bill over on their phones in Afghanistan. But
Wow, that's cool.
it was Bill was his. He loved Bill.
So how many tours did Riley do?
He done 5 official tours.
5 official, yeah, and some that I'm sure we don't know about.
Yeah, that's he done. He was gone
A lot.
a lot.
Yeah.
A lot. He would call me and because we talked every night and so he'd call me and say, Dad, I'm going hunting. I'm going to be gone. Don't get on Facebook and ask where I am, and don't call around.
Yeah.
And so I got used to that.
Yeah.
And so he would tell me he's going hunting. And a few weeks later, or a month later, or whatever it was, he'd out of the blue, he'd call me up, and you'd start talking like we had just hung up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Did he ever share his struggles with you? Did he ever, share his hard times, or was he always pretty positive when he was on the phone with you? You guys in your discussions?
When he lost Bill,
Yeah.
that was the big one.
Yeah.
And but I guess that was the big one. The night he lost Bill, he called me about 2 minutes after, and then it was different.
Yeah. Take your time. Yeah. I'm sure. That's tough. I can't even imagine. What was it like in those days? What was it like after that for him?
Well, okay, now I'm better. He just slapped me alongside the head.
He would want it that way.
Yeah. You're never supposed to shed a tear. That shows
It
weakness.
seems like he's that kind of guy.
And so,
but also he'd be proud that they were shed over him.
absolutely, and Bill.
Yeah.
But that night when he told me Bill got, Bill was about 2 miles out, and he was on his way. I mean, he said, Dad, he said they just IED'd Bill. He said, I gotta go. And he was talking as he was going, and then by the time he reached him and all, Bill was gone, and so he said, Dad, he said, I gotta go. He said, but put the phone on your chest, he says, and leave it there. Yeah. And then after that, he was pissed. Yeah. And he made him pay. He made a lot of them pay.
I'm sure.
And he stayed over there as long as he could. And whenever he could, he volunteered. He wanted whatever missions, whatever. He just wanted to be in Afghanistan because he was hunting. And it took about 5 years, but he was satisfied at the end of it. And he come back home, and he was better. And so but Bill was the big part.
Yeah.
If anything changed, it was when Bill got killed. And then he knew it was real. He always knew it was real, but then it was just so close to home.
Yeah. Kind of awakens you as a soldier to your own mortality, you realize.
Right.
Yeah.
And he couldn't think, Bill could have ever got it.
Yeah.
There was nobody that could have got Bill.
Yeah.
And the dirty bastards couldn't get him
Mm-hmm.
in a gunfight.
Yeah.
and they couldn't do
Had
it.
to give him an IED.
That's it.
Yeah.
And it was just a bad situation. So Riley, but he went back over, and like I said, he was satisfied when things got settled, and
Yeah.
then all he wanted to do was go win the war.
Yeah. What do you remember about in those in between times? Him coming home and getting to spend time with you.
When he come home, we spent a lot of time late nights together. But Riley come home and he partied,
Yeah.
and we had party. He always tried to be home July 4th,
Yeah.
and that was his and Ken, his brother. That was their. The Christmas is okay, and we had some good Christmas parties when he was home. But 4th of July, we would have parties here, and half the town would be here.
Wow.
They would come in from all over. They'd come in from North Carolina. They would come in from Alaska. Anybody that knew he was home when we were having a party, they were here. We by the end of the night, there was people laying all over. And,
Listen, trust me, I've walked around the compound, as I like to now call it, Joanne, and you may call your home, and it is an impressive space. All the space devoted to building, all these monuments to these incredible guys. They've got a fantastic woodworking shop and, kind of warehouse area back here where they build. And, you guys do all this for free, and give it away and, pay amazing tribute to Riley, and you're living that now. Of course, I'd like to talk more about that, but I want to go back to that, to him.
And so, and when he came home, he brought his horses. Mm-hmm. Then I worked for a sand plant. We had 3,000 acres, and that was one of his favorite things to do was get his horses, and they'd go out in the sand plant, and then it was Texas.
Yeah.
And he'd ride his horses, and other than that, he partied.
Yeah.
Real hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He had a good time.
He had a good time. He liked to party. There was one, and he knew that from time he got his driver's license, it was a deal that he would call me.
Yeah.
He couldn't drink and drive.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so that I picked him up several times. I got with my grandsons. It's you call me. I won't say a word.
Right. Yeah.
I'll come and get you.
Yeah.
You just call me. So.
Yeah.
And he was home. It was one of his second time the last he was home. And so I get a call at 2 a.m.
Uh-huh.
And it's Green Beret police. Riley's laying in his truck. He took his keys. I mean, he knew he couldn't drive.
Yeah.
And so he threw his keys in the back of the truck.
Uh-huh.
And he locked his doors and he went to sleep. Well, here comes the police, knocking on his window.
Uh-huh.
And so he's talking to, the police. They weren't going to arrest him. I mean, he was Riley.
Yeah, yeah.
And everybody, even then, they knew Riley. Everybody knew Riley.
Seems like the whole area knows him.
And they always had.
Yeah.
And he was their hero. Everybody, you could talk to any of them.
Yeah.
So they called me 3 a.m. And so I went, for sure, I'll get up. And the officer said, is this Riley's dad? I'm going, yeah. And he said, look, I can't let Riley drive. He said, he can't stay here because it's against law.
Yeah.
He said, you're going to have to get him.
Yeah.
Get him. So here I pulled into the nightclub in Green Beret, and Riley's standing there. And he's like, son of a he says, here I am, 4 tours, Green Beret, got to have my daddy come and get me. In that conference, he was just died laughing. So he loaded up, but that was, that's, and Riley always had someone with him.
Yeah.
If it was soldier, civilian, Riley, there was something.
He seemed popular.
Yeah, and he always had to have somebody with him. I mean, that was he didn't want to be alone.
Yeah.
And so he brought some great soldiers home.
Yeah.
And so, and then Jimmy Wayne from North Carolina ended up being his main man.
Yeah.
And he was civilian, but Jimmy, he spent a lot of time with him, and Jimmy was with him a lot. And they always bring what they call it, pumpkin pie home. It was moonshine and
like a moonshine. Like
and apple pie, and that was before they put all the other flavors, and and it was pretty wicked. I mean, he always brought 3 or 4 cases in his weapons home.
Yeah,
and he got stopped once in Georgia coming home.
Oh, really?
And him and Jimmy and Riley he was going to bring all of his weapons home and show his dad.
Yeah.
And, so his truck was loaded right down, and his engine blew in one of the towns in Georgia. Police got there, and luckily enough, he was a retired SF.
Oh, okay.
And he's looking at Riley. He's going, what the is wrong with you?
Yeah.
And Riley told him, well, he says, I want to take all my weapons and show my dad.
Yeah.
Well, of course, the cop got it. I mean, he was SF.
Yeah.
And so he stayed with him, and this is Riley could talk himself out of anything.
Yeah.
And so Riley rented a car, and they loaded them all up. The cop helped him load the moonshine, all the guns and ammo, and loaded it all up. And he said,
a perfect special forces mix.
and it was awesome. The car was just about dragging the ground when he got home, and
wow,
but that's Riley's life, and that's how.
Yeah, he's proud to serve,
and he was real proud to serve.
What do you talked about it a lot, in this past couple hours, but the family aspect of being a Green Beret. And you talked about those guys on the team being, his family, and that being thicker than any blood.
Right.
What did that family, that special, and what does that Special Forces family mean to you now?
Well, it means. Well, it's just hard to describe.
Yeah.
And it is. They have never left us alone.
Yeah.
And he used to bring soldiers home, and few team, but team, but after he was killed, the team is just, they just have, it's been 7 years.
Yeah.
And they have not left us.
Wow.
And new team, retired team, they're just team. And Riley always told me, and told us, Joanne and I, don't ever leave team.
Yeah.
And when we talked, we drank a lot of Crown, and it just always seems like it was over the full moon in the backyard. Him and I would sit back and we'd knock down a couple bottles of Crown, and he always expressed to me that the team won't ever forget us.
Yeah.
And he said they're retired. He said active. They won't even have to know me. He said, Dad, don't ever forget team.
Yeah. And
they have definitely not forgot us. I mean, we get calls and phone calls and letters, and they just want to make sure that we're okay.
Yeah.
And it's and Riley always told me, he said, don't tell team anything you don't want, Dad. And I can see it's true now, because they would do anything for us.
Yeah.
And and they're not. There's such patriots. I'm not talking anything bad.
Yeah.
It's all good. Whatever we need. It's just. And when we go there, we still go to
Pinehurst, Southern Pines,
and then we go. Of course, we go on Bragg. We'd be in trouble if we didn't take the tour of Bragg.
Yeah,
and they find out who we are, and and we aren't nobody. But
no, that's not true.
But when we're at Fort Bragg,
I refuse to hear that. And I refuse. To hear
at Fort Bragg, when they find out, they still they go, "Oh wow, that is Riley's parents."
Yeah,
and they line up to shake our hands, to hug us.
Yeah. They should,
and they definitely do.
Yeah,
and so we consider ourselves SF.
Yeah,
we are family. Riley's quote, and we got to use, as you see, it's everywhere. It's all about family.
Yeah,
and Riley meant it. And, and again, as he explained, family is not all blood. We got some of the baddest boys in the world.
Yeah, you do.
But there are
most
boys.
deadly for sure.
And,
and some of the kindest as
and
well.
the kindest.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's amazing when you watch these men, like with kiddos. Even when Riley got killed, of course there's so many people here. But there was one young man, he had a disability, a really severe disability. But they knew that inside his head that everything was okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that there wasn't nothing wrong with his mind, that you just had to get it out. And 3 of them, I mean, they sat here in their project, they went right over to him. And they could have talked to anybody, but they went over to this young man, and they sat in the table with him, and all 3 of them sat there, and it took them all day to figure this man out, young boy out.
Wow.
He was probably 14. And by the end of the evening, they figured out he liked punk music.
Mm-hmm.
And they had their tablets of the day going, and they were communicating with this young man.
Wow.
And they could have done anything, but they stayed with him all day long, and it was just remarkable. And
they took that time to get to know him. Yeah.
Yes.
And they didn't have to do that.
No,
But they did it.
and they did it, and they wanted to. And that young man, I'm sure that was, for him, it was definitely life changing. And his uncle was just blown away. His uncle,
Wow.
he was raised with Riley and played football with Riley and everything. And so, but his uncle was just, nobody, doctors, nobody got to that young man, and they did it in one day.
Wow. You know what it reminds me of is like anytime I have an event or I've had any galleries or anything for the Veterans Project is like my buddy Nate, he's a Green Beret. And he will always, it's like if you want to look for Nate, you'll find him with the person that people in the room consider the least important.
Right.
You'll find him hanging out with that person. You'll be at this gallery at like Sundance, and he'll be over talking to like a cocktail waiter, and like asking him about where he's from and like how he grew up and all that. He wants to know that guy.
Yeah, and that was another thing, Riley in school. And it's cliche, but Riley did always stuck up for whoever the bullies that was being bullied upon.
Wow.
And it didn't matter, it just didn't matter. Riley was there. And when I got a call I got several calls from school.
You got calls about Riley? What?
And, but half of them were that he knocked the crap out of somebody because they were picking on somebody.
Oh, that's what I believed what you were going to say.
And it was, and everybody in school going in, the principal would go, Mick, Mr. Carroll was his name. I still call him Mr. Carroll. Mm-hmm. And he'd say, you're not going to like this. Mm-hmm. And I'd say, well, what happened? And, he'd say, well, them guys went over there and they were picking on so-and-so, and Riley went over and he beat them all up. Mm-hmm. And I'd go, and? He said, well, we're going to have to punish him. And I said, well, okay. And I'd turn to Riley and I'd say, back to the buses, because the biggest thing was they made them wash buses. They just they didn't kick them out of school or nothing, but labor.
Yeah.
And I said, Riley, you know what you're going to have to do? And he'd go over and we'd go there and we'd both go wash buses, because he had to get the buses washed and stuff. Yeah. In that instance,
I think it's a problem. I think it's a real problem that we vilified that type of activity.
Yeah.
Defending someone.
And it never. It never got to him.
Yeah, he didn't care. It wasn't going to stop him.
No, it did not stop him. There was one time that 4 of his buddies, where they weren't his buddies at that time, but they jumped on him at school because they were going to get him.
Yeah.
And he come home and he's pretty beat up.
Yeah.
And I said, but you got to love Toller. Mm-hmm. And I started calling the parents, said, here we go. And I said, I'm going to bring Riley over and we're going to let them boys go in the back yard. Mm-hmm. And one-on-one. I said, I'm going to visit all 4 of them.
Yeah.
And even the dads, I'd go over and told them what happened. They told them, all right. The kiddos are going. I mean, it was probably 7th grade.
Yeah.
Kiddos are going, no. And all the daddies going, oh, yeah. Even the mamas going, oh, yeah. Yeah,
You're going to duke it out.
Yeah. You wanted some of Riley with the bunch of you. Well,
Yeah.
here you go back, and Riley will go back. Whoop them all, and then they become friends, good friends, really tight friends. So.
Wow. That's the most Texas story I've ever heard.
I
love it.
That's Toller, Texas, without a doubt.
What's amazing is how I met you was, Matt had contacted me about you, and he'd seen that I was in around Toller. He said, and he'd followed the Veterans Project for a while. He's like, what the heck are you doing in Toller, Texas, man? I said, bro, that's my best friend lives here, my marketing director. He was like, what, out of all the places? I said, yeah, man, he lives in Toller. I said, I don't know much about this town except there's like one stoplight. He said, I could tell you something way more cool about this town than that stoplight. And he told me that story, and I was like, oh my gosh. And then told me about the VFW being renamed after your son, and I was like just blown away by that story. And I said, this was, shame on me for this, but this was about a year and a half ago. They first told me, and I'd just been traveling ever since. And I came back through, and I said, Matt, whatever happened to Mick? He said, oh, Mick's there, and his wife's there. What are you doing? And I said, man, I want to meet him. I want to meet him really badly. And I said, would he be up for meeting me? Because you never know. I don't know going into a lot of these situations. It's very sensitive for me.
Right.
Because having, known guys I've lost and guys in San Antonio in the area that have been killed, I'm always very sensitive around the parents. It's very hard for a veteran to go back to the parents very often, and deal with that loss because it's in your face, It's all of a sudden, it's right there again. Because you're reminded of it every day. That was your friend. That was your buddy, your pal. And then you see the continuous, pain that the parents live with and having to take that sacrifice on every day. It's tough. So then, explain that to Matt. And Matt's like, oh, no, I think he'd meet you. He's pretty proud of Riley, and I'm sure he'd be proud to talk to you. Just meeting you is like, oh, my gosh, all the connections. And then to be in Toller, Texas, and Lions of Kandahar was the first book I ever read about Iraq or Afghanistan. Just wild. So it's an honor to be here. I appreciate that.
We're honored to have you. Yeah. We're honored to have all of our vets here.
Yeah. Well, I could see that, and you formed a great family here through that, and you're experiencing that every day. I want to go back though and talk about that day, of course, and Riley, and and finding out, obviously as a father, that you lost him. What do you remember in particular leading up to that day and talking to Riley?
Well, Riley and I, we Skyped whenever we could, but at 10 p.m. my time, Riley always told me, if I can get a hold of you, it's going to be between 10 and 11. So everybody at work, they knew that, and I was a supervisor there, but they knew that there ain't better no reason to call that bothered me between 10 and 11.
That was your Riley time.
That was Riley time. And everybody made sure, everybody at work, they loved Riley also. Riley would always visit work when he'd come home.
Yeah.
Go harass everybody and make fun of me so in front of them so they could all,
As a good son does. Yeah.
Yes. And
make fun of the boss man.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so but that night, Riley got home. Riley, he Skyped me at 10 o'clock. He came right on, and man, he was dirty and sweaty and sooty and whatever else you could talk about. And he had just been out for 18 hours or so, and they were out trying to get. They were blowing our choppers out of the air, and so they were out hunting them. And he got back, and but he told me, he says, Dad, he's first of all, he said, hey, he said, I got a briefing in 20 minutes. Don't let me go to sleep. And I said, all right. And so sure enough, I let him go to sleep. I sat there and watched him on the monitor. And in 20 minutes, I woke him up. I said, Riley, you got to go. And, man, what the F, Dad? And I said, no. I said, it's 20 minutes. You needed a little rest. And so he said, all right. He said, now, tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the morning, he said, be by your computer. He said, I'm going to call you. He said, I won't get a night's sleep. And so then he went on, and so then I was there at that morning, and he was all fresh and looking like the Green Beret he was. And he said to me, he says, Dad, he said, they have stopped our air support. And he said, I haven't, and mind you, this is 18 days after Benghazi.
Yeah.
And he said, we have no air support. And he said, most of my commandos, they're cowards. He said, this is a hard fought. He said, and I don't mind everybody knowing this part, that he said, he said, I want you to know, he said, that I'm not fighting for my government right now.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I'm fighting for my brothers.
Yeah.
He said, it's all about my brothers. And he said, we're fighting for each other to stay alive. And and he is pretty direct. And so we talked, and we said other things, other things were said.
Yeah.
But and he told me goodbye, and he told me he loved me, and he thanked me. For raising him that the man he is. And he knew that but he I'm sorry, but he knew that that was probably our last time we were going to talk.
Yeah.
And like a lot of soldiers, they know when their end is near.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the last time.
Yeah.
But well, I guess
those are tears to be proud of over a great man. I know I can't imagine how tough that is.
But about 12 hours later, I guess it was, the green car showed up. And Joanne was here alone. I was at work.
Yeah.
And of course they wouldn't talk. They just
Waited for you.
Waited for me. They told her that, asked her if she could get a hold of me, and they waited out in the car. And so that's once Joanne told me that the green car was here. But then after that, it all. Then I had to do what was expected. Yeah. And Riley had told me several occasions of what I would do.
Yeah.
And he had his list. And he gave me, of course, I'm sure you wrote one too, but he gave me a letter every deployment, and we kept them all. Didn't open them, and we still haven't opened the others.
Wow.
We only opened the one.
Yeah.
And he said, when they're there at the door, Dad, he says, and then he said, it's not about me no more. He said, it's about my brothers.
Wow.
And he said, so you're going to have to step up.
Yeah.
And so, but we had talked about what I would do before that. It's heavy conversations. And, He told me I'd talk over his casket. I would make sure he wasn't buried in military clothes, that he wanted to be in his Western clothes and his boots and his hat.
True Texan.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so we made sure all that happened, and hopefully, and he told me that never to mourn. He said, never mourn me. Mm-hmm. He said, celebrate it.
Yeah.
He said, whatever my KIA date is, he says, you damn well better have a party. And so
I bet you do.
And so we did. And
I want to be here for the next one.
Absolutely, you'll be invited. It'll be next year. It'll be the Ruck.
Yeah.
And so that's we do have a party, and some don't understand it. We're different Gold Stars. Mm-hmm. And I know there's a lot more out there like me, but there's a lot more that, there's nothing bad. I mean, everybody's got to handle their
grief differently. I remember this scene from, I was watching, this was, again, before I had left Iraq, but I was watching this scene from Inside the Green Berets or something like that. It was some National Geographic special. And one of their guys had just been, it was, I think, 5th Group. One of their guys had just been killed in Afghanistan. And it was like Firebase Anaconda or something like that. And it's a small patrol base. And they're all sitting in the main room. And they're like, all right, for lack of a better name, I think it was John, but they said, John passed away last night, and we're thankful for his sacrifice. And they said, toast. And they brought up their waters, and they all toasted, and I'm sure they had other drinks off camera. But they said toast, and they said, all right, boys, mission's at 2100. Get a little rest. Time to go out. I was just like, oh my gosh.
And that is true to Riley.
Yeah.
That is what, I told Mike's wife, and I don't know if it was Sean's wife, but it was Mike's wife. They got a hold of me on the phone, and, they were trying to help me as much as they could on the phone. And Joanne, my wife, and I told them then, I said, you tell them that not to be grieving, that to get back out there.
Yeah.
And fight that war, and when they get home, they can get up with me, and we'll talk about it then. But you get it because of Riley, and that's how Riley wanted it.
Yeah.
Because if you're grieving, you're not paying attention to the job.
Yeah.
And so that was and that's how we are, and we're privileged because we have the SF boys, Green Beret, and Chris, he's my son now, and Joanne's son, and Rich, and Mike, and Sean, and we're still in contact with Sean, and Chris, of course, all of them. They're definitely family, and
it's special to have that sense of family,
and it really is. And I had Riley for 39 years.
Yeah.
A lot of these Gold Stars didn't have their kiddos for 19 years, and they hadn't talked to them for a year before because they were over there. And I talked to Riley, every day.
Yeah.
And being that he was who he was, I don't know if he was supposed to be on the phone. But he was.
But he found a way.
But he found a way that he'd call me. We'd get it was all odd times, on the phone. And, it's even through that battle in Spear and Gar, how he got that phone, I have no idea. And Rusty,
we don't ask questions.
We don't ask. Rusty just smiles when he hears about the things that I knew about.
Yeah.
And some of the conversations were 5 minutes, some of them were 10 minutes, but, when I read the book, I was, wow, I remember that. Yeah. And that was before
I never knew about this book.
And that was before Riley was killed. So,
yeah.
Wow, yeah, I remember that. And I remember that. And, there was one time when, I heard tink, 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 and it went silent. About 4 hours later, Riley called me, called me back. Wow, Dad, yeah, that was awesome. He's talking,
something that most human beings cannot understand or fathom. Yeah.
And, they just, he just went through, and Riley wasn't a religious person by far. But when Riley come home in 2006, Riley knew there was a higher being. And he knew that, like, in that battle, that the Lord was with him. And, of course, Bill wasn't killed until after that battle.
Yeah.
And
can you speak a little bit on that for those that don't understand, too? What kind of, those who haven't read the book, that was a very
intense.
Momentous.
Yeah. You take 3 teams of Green Beret and their commandos, and which it ended up to be about 40 of them.
Yeah.
And the Canadians were going down the valley, and they were going to do a cleanup. And the whole deal was, the way I understand it, was that they were going to, Taliban, they were going to go into Kandahar and literally behead all the Christians.
Wow.
and take them out.
Yeah.
And that was going to be the turn of the war, the turn of the tide, because and so the boys were on a mountain up above, to make it short, and it was from up there, it was a hard fought to get to where it was, but they were watching, they seen what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
And so they told their commanders that they were going to go in and help. And after enough persuasion, the whole battle was them getting to the battle. But the 40 or 50 of them that was there, they took on 1,400.
Wow.
And they spearheaded right through it.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a 3-day battle, and the enemy was 20 foot away, and there was hundreds.
Yeah.
And people, if you hadn't read the book, you need to go get that book, because it's a hell
I'll
of
confirm that.
Yeah,
it's the
a
first
hell of
I read.
A battle.
Yeah.
And like Riley said, the Lord was there, and they were not supposed to lose, and the Canadians weren't supposed to, because Canadians were taking heavy casualty.
Yeah.
And they weren't. So because of our boys, they saved that company.
Yeah.
And the Canadians knew it. And
Yeah.
I was talking the other day, back in the day when fracking first started, they didn't have enough drivers and trucks, so they shipped in Canadians in their trucks.
Mm-hmm.
By Trimac was their name of the company. And they're Canadian. They were all Canadians, and they knew just by my name, and somebody had told them, well, that's Riley Stephens' dad. And this was like, 4 months after the battle, before the book, before they got home.
Yeah.
And they knew who Riley was. They knew who Bill was, and they knew. I mean, they knew the team, and they knew they saved their countrymen, and they end up signing me a Canadian flag before they left.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it was.
That's cool.
Yes. I didn't know how, because Riley wouldn't. He just said, "Yeah, Dad, we were in one hell of a battle," but I didn't realize the intensity until everybody else told me.
Yeah.
And then he come home.
Mm.
And when he come home, then we went to one of the soldiers that he helped save.
Mm-hmm.
We walked into the hospital in Bragg, and there was his wife and his children and him with a big gaping hole in his leg, and he was in tears and rusty, and his commander was there, and I mean, they threw the stuff off the walls, and they put up maps, and wow, this is Riley's dad. Let me show you what the battle was.
Yeah.
And the wife comes up to Riley and hugs him and tells the kids, he is the reason that your daddy's alive today.
Man.
And this is.
How proud were you as a father in that moment? I mean, you had a lot of moments of pride, but that
was, that. It showed me who he really was. I knew who he was, but I mean, and he was like, gosh, kicking his feet. No, I didn't do nothing, And,
looking down at his feet.
Literally.
I didn't do much.
I didn't do much. I'd done my job. But that's how they feel.
Yeah.
And I'm sure all of you warriors, you did your job.
Yeah, but those, especially in the examples of Green Berets like Riley, their job is to be heroic.
Right.
Something that regular average civilians look at and go, oh, no, there's no way. Are you kidding me? You're talking about, odds like that of 40 to 50 to 1,400. You're saying, nope, I don't want that. Yeah. Green Berets are going, cool, let's do it.
Yeah. Where else would this happen? Yeah. The Aussies, one of the benefits that I was at, and a team, they come in, and they give me a little statue that I showed you, and they give me a fifth of scotch, and they give, between me and Maggie, Mike Dunkson's Gold Star wife, they give us a print, and it was of them, and they said, you're going to have to share the print. We couldn't get but one, but we end up, that's turned over to the organization. Wow. But it was because they said, they were down and pinned, and all of a sudden this big son come in, and he just was firing and going forward and giving the time they needed to get it together. And they said, good possibility, without him, none of us would have been here.
Wow.
And, they came here to talk to me and Maggie. And and there's a story out there that you can Google, but one of Riley's friends, his high school friends,
Yeah.
and I believe Riley was a ranger at that time.
Yeah.
And there were places where they shouldn't be. And Dwayne they were pinned down, and he had one of his battle buddies, was dead.
Mm-hmm.
And he thought it was it.
Yeah.
And,
Riley did?
No, this friend of his did.
Okay.
And he said, we were in a foxhole, so called.
Mm-hmm.
And he said we're done. We're getting overrun. And he said, and all of a sudden, he says, the explosions, the choppers, he says, but I look up, and he said, I seen this, and again, explicit, but he said, I seen this big son of a bitch.
Mm-hmm.
And he jumps down in the hole, and he's firing, and he jumps down in the hole with me, and he said, it was Riley.
Mm-hmm.
He hadn't seen Riley since graduation.
Wow.
And he said, Riley didn't even flinch. He turned around and looked, and he said, hey, he said, you can't fight this war from here. Or this battle from here. And he helped grab his buddy, and they took him to a chopper, and
Wow.
put his friend on the chopper, and he helped this old boy into the chopper, and they said, hey, come on, let's go. And Riley said, no. He said, we ain't done.
Mm.
And that was the last he seen Riley.
Wow. Wow. Amazing.
Yeah.
What a legacy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all a warrior can hope for.
And that's, And Riley explained to me how if he died, how he would want to die. And, that was, he died exactly how a Green Beret would want to die if he had to die.
Right. Yeah.
He died within 20 seconds, and he was protecting his brothers.
Yeah.
And he was fighting with them.
Wow. What a testament.
And that's, and I think about that. And being a Gold Star, and that's what, again, that's where I went to is 39 years. But I had Riley for 39 years, and I literally had him for 39 years.
Yeah.
He called his daddy for good and bad.
Yeah.
When he was a kid, he called me good and bad,
Yeah.
But, it was, how awesome.
You can hear how much love he had for you, though, because he's calling you every day, and he's always with his dad on the phone.
Yeah.
He loved you a lot.
And he told everybody.
Yeah.
And
everybody knew Mick.
That's it.
Yeah.
And that's his Facebook. Of course, he didn't put his picture. He used the Crusader.
Yeah.
And they called him Mick's son.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd say, well, why Mick's son? And he says, because I want the whole effing world to know who I am. And, he used to tell everybody that. I'm Mick's son.
Yeah.
And so, how awesome is that?
That's amazing, yeah.
And we got mad at each other, but we never left that. Never left that we didn't say we love each other.
Yeah.
And the hug, and that's
it's two tough guys. It happens. Yeah.
Yeah, because
you're gonna spare a little
bet.
bit. Two hard Texans.
You bet. Two bulls in a china couch.
It's gonna happen.
And it did, but it didn't matter. He'd be so mad at me that he'd spit fire.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd look at me and say, well, I love you. And out the door he'd go,
You were lucky to be on that side of things, right?
Yeah.
The others were not.
But he never left that we weren't on the same plane.
Right.
That's when the last I got him was in Fayetteville at the airport.
Yeah.
And we just come back from Spartan Run, and we got kicked out of a bar in Virginia with the team. And I mean, we had a
classic way to go.
It was. We had a hell of a weekend.
Yeah.
And that was. And he knew. When we give our last hug there, it was Dad.
Mm-hmm.
Remember this.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
he looked me in the eyes and remember this.
Man.
And I smelled him.
Mm-hmm.
And I can smell him today.
I'm sure you can.
And
Yeah.
Just.
Powerful experience.
It really was. And, it was, and one day, and which everybody knows, I'm going to open my eyes and he's going to say, hey, old man, where you been?
Yeah. Yeah.
I truly
You're
believe
going to get
that.
to see him again.
Yeah, without a doubt.
I don't just believe it. I know it.
Yeah, and we all do.
Yes.
And, he's with Bill and he's with Mike and
yeah. All incredible men.
You know, all incredible men.
Yeah.
And Leanne, and Leanne.
Yeah.
You know, Leanne is Joanne's daughter, and she died several years ago. And
you'll get to see them again,
Yeah.
though. That's awesome. Yeah.
and they were real close.
Yeah.
And he was, and you know, he always talked about looking forward to that.
Yeah. Wow.
You know, seeing his grandpa and Leanne, and he had a little brother, and we always, that was, you know, he was his guardian angel.
Yeah. That's awesome. He sounds like an incredible guy. It sounds like you had him in 39 years, an absolute warrior, and he went out like a warrior going home.
And he did.
Makes me think of that Tecumseh speech. You know, you heard that one? If you, I can't. I'm gonna quote it and then I'm gonna mess it up. It's like, if you die, don't cry. Die singing your battle song. Die like a warrior going home.
Yes.
That's Tecumseh. But that was like something that the SEALs would use as like their cry, you know, their battle cry. But I think that's powerful. And I think, you know, you talked about Riley wanting to go out that way. That says a lot about the man.
And I have his iPad and his one they took to war.
Yeah.
You know, of course we got his iPad that he's home with, and then I have his iPad that he. And that some of his, of course, team tell me that when he used to lay down, he'd put his ears on and.
Yeah.
Going into battle, he would lay down in the chopper and go dead asleep.
Wow.
And, you know, they'd wake him up when they'd get there, but he'd be listening to, I don't even know their names. You know, it's the Scottish type music, but it's headbanging music. And, you know, just.
Flogging Molly, maybe?
Yeah. And it was, you know, you listen to it and it was like you were in an artillery battle or something. And they'd say, you know, that they'd get there and they'd land or however they dismounted, and they'd wake him up. He'd wake up and let's do this.
Yeah.
And he would be in his glory.
You know, sir, I'd tell you this. I would love to have, you know, done a veterans project on Riley, but it's just as much of a privilege to hear his story through you.
Awesome. Thank you.
What, you know, you talked about living for legacy, and, you know, in him telling you, you know, this is it. Now it's up to you. You know, it's going to be up to you.
Right.
Can you talk about a little bit about what you and Joanne have done since, you know, since losing him? And
well,
a little bit about Riley's run as well.
Right away, of course, everybody sends you money because they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
You know, so you get money. And and of course, the money that we got, we weren't going to spend.
Right.
You know, that is just not what we do. So we said, you know what? Riley loved his school, and let's do scholarships. And we tried to, you know,
which is Toller High School, right?
Toller High School, and trade school if the ones that wanted trade school, so we thought, well, we'll just give this for. I don't know how much money we give the first year that we got, and we give everything to scholarships, and around $3,000. And then we thought, you know what? Let's not stop this. You know, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And so let's have a run. And so we started the Riley Run. And we and everybody else. I mean, the friends, everybody. And the first one is it just blew us away because we were thinking, maybe we'll get about 40 people.
Yeah.
And I mean, 300 people showed up.
Wow.
And then his team came in, and the team that he was with when he died came in, and it was just awesome.
Yeah.
And so we carried that on for 5 years. And then came time that, like everything, you know, is coming to an end.
Yeah.
And so now, and again, as not to diminish anything, it was awesome. We give out $56,000 in scholarships, and we were able to get the kiddos that were just starting junior high, and whether I guess they're 8th grade, and got them all the way through school helping them. And them kiddos we were able to give scholarships to. And our last year was the kiddos that were graduating with those scholarships.
Wow. What a feeling.
And it was awesome. And, in like a dual credit, we have dual credit here. So while they were in school, we were able to help these kiddos through Anonymous. So they were able to get their college credits in school. I mean, it was it was a big deal for us. And
that's amazing.
And it worked out real well. And then
all through the life of a tremendous sacrifice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then so the VFW, they came along, and they Riley loved the VFW. Riley and I got smashed many times at VFW.
Shout out to the Toller VFW.
Amen.
Named after Riley now.
Right. Now it's Riley Stephens Memorial Post 7835.
Which is amazing.
And Joanne, she can testify because she had to come and get us each time. We'd go in there, and if Riley and I would come in there, we never left Silver because there was 30 drinks always. I mean, they just everybody. They knew we drank Crown, and so
that is an old school VFW.
Yeah,
too.
and it's an old
get
school.
Those Vietnam boys.
You
there.
bet. And we would get smashed, and the waitress. She'd have our keys. She'd come on, give me the keys. Yeah, she'd call up Joanne, and she'd say, "Yep, the boys are ready." And we'd be hugging each other.
She knew.
And we played shuffle. They had a shuffleboard down, and we played shuffleboard and get drunk, and everybody. So we decided to. And Ken, my youngest, he's a 20-year vet in Iraq, and he was a hell of a soldier himself. And so we were talking, and we started a ruck for the awareness of 22 a few years ago.
Right.
And we hadn't really involved it into what it's evolving to now. So now we do ruck forward through the VFW.
Okay.
And on Riley's birthday, Riley's KIA date. So that's where we're going to have, this year we had the party there. And it really turned out. I mean, our other rucks, lots of honor, a lot of respect, don't get me wrong, but it was like 25, 30 people. Yeah. And then this year we done a 22 and a 5K ruck from the VFW into Green Beret and back to the VFW. We had about 80 ruckers, but we had, there was hundreds of people that participated. And then we had the party that night, and we had music and bands, and other people come in. We fed we love feeding people. We love feeding people. And
I believe that by that grill I saw out back. My gosh.
And so, so next year we're going to do it again. We're going to have, and what we did is the local Veterans Relief Fund through the VFW had been depleted.
Yeah.
And so, as you know, you got to have a mission.
Right.
And our mission was the fund.
Yeah.
And through all of our awesome sponsors that sponsored us through the Riley Run, these people don't even hesitate. We walk in, they go, "Oh, wow, how can we help you?"
Yeah.
We don't even have to ask them, all of them.
That's awesome.
And so we were able to raise, around $9,000.
Wow.
On that one ruck, and that helped. And we give the local fire department 25%. And that way it helped the fire department, but they're all of his brothers also. They've known him his whole, they were all, now they're 49-year-old men, 48. But the community is just awesome.
Seems tremendous out here. And they, where can people go if they want to support that?
They can still go to Ruck Forward on Facebook.
Okay.
We're still on Facebook.
Yeah.
I believe we are.
Yeah.
It's
We're going to say that they are.
We're going to say they are, but
and if you don't, if it's not right, then you can always contact me at a later date, and then I'll get you.
Yeah, and the Green Beret, the VFW, 7835.
Yeah,
Riley Stephens Memorial Post.
Yeah, that's
hard
to miss.
Yes, and they would definitely get in contact with us.
Yeah, awesome.
And we're gonna be.
Tell them in the memo part to put Ruck Forward.
Yeah, and if they ever did want to send anything, it'd have to, it's ruck forward, but everything we do now is made out to the VFW,
Right.
because we don't want the cash.
Right.
We want it to go to the VFW.
Yeah.
And but next year, September, the last weekend of September, because KI date is his KI is 9/28.
Right.
And we will have the party and the ruck and the get together on that weekend.
That's awesome.
Yes, and next year we have people now that are getting a hold of us. We were debating whether to have the ruck, maybe we just have a little party. Well, that didn't work.
Turned into a big old.
Yeah. Everybody, the other people's, they're wanting to continue it and would like to grow, and so we're going to work through the VFW and ruck forward.
That's awesome.
And it's not a 40, 80-pound pack ruck unless you want to personally abuse yourself.
Yeah.
Some
of those Green Berets probably.
And they do. This year, one of the soldiers, he was a peacetime soldier, and he felt bad because he's a peacetime soldier. Well, he 2 car batteries and 4 weight bells he was carrying all the way through this, and he was running. And he'd run, and because through ours we don't have winners in that.
Right.
We all gather, and it's all a lot of respect. And this old boy would run up, and he would stop and wait for it, but he'd run up, stop, and it was his way of giving back and proving to all the warriors that he gets it.
Right. Yeah.
And we had Riley's team here, some of his team here, and they wouldn't have it any other way. Rich, he comes in, Ox. He looks right at Joy and I, Dad and Mom, what are we going to do next year? What's the date?
Yeah.
And, Chris, and they just would not have it any other way. What are we going to do?
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yes. And so we're going to do the ruck forward.
Yeah. That's great. What would you like for those that don't know Riley or didn't know him? What would you like for them to know most about who he was?
Cliche, but what a soldier he was, and how much he loved his country and his family. Yeah. And again, as we have explained, family is not always blood.
Right.
And he loved his, what a soldier he was.
Yeah.
And it was all about his country. And at the end, it was all about his team.
Yeah. Wow.
And how he defended the underdog.
And that he did always defend the underdog.
Yeah.
Through school, through everything. And Riley would give you his last dollar.
Yeah.
And he would.
He seemed like that kind of guy.
Yeah. He had no problem. He just, whatever you needed.
Yeah.
As long as you're wearing a slouch. You weren't going to get it if he just didn't give it away. You had to be earning it.
He sounded like the embodiment of what we all know and want for everyone to know about Texas,
right? And
being a Green Beret, and that together is the ultimate Texan.
And like Rusty, Rusty said that he told me, and he put it in the book. He said he would rather fight with no other one than a Texan, because a Texan, they never go back. They don't understand going back or turning around. It's forward.
No retreat. It's always
no
forward.
retreat.
Yeah,
absolutely. And that is pretty much the way it is.
Yeah,
I mean that's
awesome.
And his nephews and everybody, they're proven. And Ken, his boys.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to say that it's been an absolute privilege to be here and spend this time with you. And I want to thank you for coming on the podcast, because I know how, difficult this can be talking about your son. It's obviously your son. I can't imagine, my father, losing me and what he'd have to deal with, through that. And so it's amazing what you're doing in carrying his legacy forward. And I think it's absolutely incredible that, he had those deep, hard discussions with you, because that probably made it a little bit easier when, knowing that that's what.
Oh, it made it a whole lot easier. Yeah. And again, that's what we say about we love our gold stars, but as a SF is a different breed.
Yeah.
And the Green Beret, we're a different breed.
Yeah. Well, we're proud of you. We are. And, anybody that's listening to this, again, that's, going to be Ruck Forward on Facebook. You can get in personal contact with me, and I'll talk to Mick, and, we'll lead you to the right place to help out with this in any way that you can. And
we want to come and join us next year.
Yeah, come and join.
Yeah, that's what we want them to do. We want them to come and ruck with us and party with us that night.
If you don't come ruck and party with us, you're not going to be my favorite followers of the Veterans Project. I just threw that out there.
And you're missing a lot.
Yeah, you're missing a lot.
You're missing a lot.
Because I'm going to be there too.
Absolutely.
And I can't wait to go. And Mick and Joanne are way cooler than me. So you're going to have a good time. So, Mick, thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate you.
I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on, Mick. And don't forget that our legacies are the mission.
This has been the Veterans Project Podcast with our founder, Tim Kay. Check us out at www.thevetsproject.com, on Instagram at The Veterans Project, Facebook, The Veterans Project, and Twitter at Project_Veteran. Thanks for listening, and don't forget, our legacies are the mission.